18.4 billion people, or 40% of the world's population, live in China and India. Some economists believe that China and India are moving towards becoming the world's largest economies. We look at the economic growth of the large Asian nations, their increasing trade relations, and the change in U.S. policies towards India and China. Currently, the United States has the largest and most technologically advanced economy in the world, with a per capita GDP of $43,500. China's per capita GDP is $7,600, and India's is $3,700. Analysts say China and India may eventually surpass the United States economically, but it will be a long time before that happens. India and China have different political systems. India is the world's largest democracy, but China is still under tight communist government control. Western analysts say foreign investors are willing to invest in countries with authoritarian regimes if it suits their business interests. Foreign investors go where more money is to be made, and they want a predictable regime, and sometimes authoritarian regimes provide more predictability than in democratic countries. They say India, China may owe some of their economic success to their location, but they noted that both face very different challenges. Generally speaking, China has gone much further than India in trade liberalization and in opening to foreign investment. So many people have expressed some doubts about the sustainability of the Indian high growth at this time, unless the country proceeds more aggressively on the globalization bus. India and China have both advantages and disadvantages as well. Issues facing India are much more broad-based, such as improvement in infrastructural facilities, effective administration, labor reforms, etc. One disadvantage that China has is the lack of a good quality record in software. Another disadvantage is low percentage of Chinese population speaking English and the less mature and relatively new business process outsourcing industry. However, China has certain advantages compared to India that includes lower manpower cost, as Chinese workers cost less than similarly qualified Indians. China and India have come a long way since they fought a brief border war in 1962. Both countries are not only developing economically at rapid speed, but they are also making extraordinary effort to increase mutual trade and to improve bilateral relations. Trade between India and China reached $18.4 billion last year, up from only $338 million in 1992. Both countries pledged to double trade to $40 billion a year during talks in New Delhi between Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and Chinese President Hu Jintao. Despite these developments, several analysts say India remains suspicious of China's relationship with its long-term rival Pakistan. And China is concerned about New Delhi's growing ties with Washington, especially their landmark nuclear agreement allowing India access to civilian nuclear technology. Some expect the United States to deepen ties with India, a democracy it views as less threatening, as a counterbalance. Although the vast majority of the rural population in both countries remains illiterate and impoverished, and many structural and institutional problems lie ahead, many analysts say there is no doubt about the enormous economic potential of China and India in the 21st century.
And welcome back to the second segment of tonight's edition of the Daily Debate, where we'll be taking a look at the latest in the developments of China and India as large new economic powers. And I'm pleased to be joined in the studio by Mr. AbdelRahman Labib, economic expert. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us tonight on the Daily Debate. Let's start off by speaking a bit about the potentials of China and India, in your opinion. How do you view their potential?
First of all, China has a big history for last few years in the economic. Now they're trying to push out, to kick out Japan to have the second economic worldwide after US economic. But as you see, there is some also problems in China in front of other countries, and you see that the G20 last few days are pushing China to increase their currency rates according to the other currencies. So I think if they succeed to do that, this will affect the economic China very much, because this is at least will decrease the China export by 20%. And we know that China economy based on the export, because the local consumers doesn't spend a lot of money on these products, and especially it's not an open country, so it's the most important thing for them, the export.
Right.
The other side, it's India.
Yes.
If it is India, it's not based on the manufacture, but the very important issue in India, and they are very clever in the technology industry and programming, especially, and development of softwares.
Right.
And we see that most of big US companies now start to move their base to India, especially because the labor is very cheap comparing to US.
Yes.
So I think India will not face the same problem China face now.
So what are some of the challenges that India would face at the moment?
As a problems, I don't see a lot of problems in front of India comparing to China. I think that the way is more easier comparing to China, because China is in big fight in front of other industrial companies, especially German and Europe company. On the head of them, Germany trying to push China to increase their currency.
Right. Now, do you think that the large population of these countries plays a role in their economic advantage at the moment?
Sure, it is advantage because they utilize population is very good. Labors are very cheap. Also, they are very work harder. They are very hard worker. So they don't face problems to have this cheap populations to increase their product according to the other countries. Sure, because if you're comparing to Europe or US, labors are very, very expensive comparing to these countries, yes.
So what other advantages would they face aside from labor? How about the quality of the products?
They have all the quality. If we see that China products, we see that it's very low quality and at the end of very high quality. They have everything. It's based on what you need. They will find you will find, and how much you want to pay. You will find the product equivalent to your money, and it's very easy to them to do what you want.
So does this increase their competitiveness in terms of international markets?
For sure. Now they have a big market share. As we see, that the US is the biggest economy. It's about 40% from the worldwide economy. And now China is trying to kick out Japan from the second economy and trying to have this seat. And this because, as I said, they can do any quality. If you're comparing to Japan, they do only high quality. But China can find low quality and high quality. So they can sell their products in any markets for cheap countries, rich countries. So they can satisfy any kind of markets, and trying to find also open markets in another new countries in the future, I think. Yeah.
Right. So now, in your opinion, what is the response of international huge economic powers regarding the fast growing of these two countries?
This is a problem facing Europe now, especially if we see that's a problem in Europe now because of the debts in a lot of countries in Europe. If you see Greece last year, now is Ireland and Portugal and Spain has some problems. So the European Union, because it's one entity. So this is a problem for them because they have internal problems, economic problems, and Germany Germany and France especially don't face these problems, but also it's affected by these problems in other countries because it's one entity, as you said. So it's very important to them to have a good economy or good markets to sell their products comparing to China. And this especially was the main issue discussed in the last G20 in last few days also, and also maybe they have some problems with US also.
With the United States.
Yeah.
Now we've seen some clashes. That actually leads me to the next question. China from one side and the US and Europe in the other side. Now, what are some of the reasons that you attribute these clashes, especially in terms of the economic outcome?
About the China, so if you talk about some problems they may face, first of all, as we said, that the currency rate for this currency war worldwide. The other issue which heard a few months ago, that's because of mortgage, because housing prices in China has dropped about maybe for 50% a few months ago, and this have big problem credit. And this effect that we have, China announced in last weekend, they will increase the interest rates for the second time in very short term. And also this affect their stock markets, because stock markets in China dropped 5% on last sessions on Friday last week. So there is also some debt problems internally, but sure, it will not the same as US has had in 2007. But sure, there is some problems which not and we can't find in India as China.
And how about India in terms of some of their responses?
India, because the people there are very poor, consumer spending is not much. China also is not, comparing to Europe, is not that expensive, but China is more than China. So I would see that India don't face a lot of problems comparing to China, especially also China based on industry. So it needs some raw materials, because sure, not all raw material is available in China.
Yes.
Because of India based on the technology
they don't need that much
industrial, so they don't need, it's only based on the human resource. So its cost is more cheaper than China, so they can be comparing to China. I think they will be more competitor in the future.
In the worldwide market. Yeah. Now, we have seen a visit by the British Prime Minister to China to boost economic cooperation. How would you read such a visit by the British Prime Minister?
I think China, because the culture of the country and culture of peoples, they will not invest in other countries. They only need to open markets. So I think they will try to convert this visit, instead of invest in Egypt, I think they will try to open more markets in Egypt, and I think they are very clever, and I think this will be in their interest.
That's their target.
So I think there is conflict of interest in this,
in the two things. And also the American President Barack Obama made a historical Asian tour, and he started off with India. So what do you see behind the visit by the American President?
I think the American president, it was just a few days ago, this visit before G20. I think they are trying to make some of peace before G20 meeting, because he faced a lot of problems with Europe, because Federal Reserve in US make a lot of pressure in US dollar for last few weeks, especially after the quantitative easing with 600 billion US. So I think he tried to find some countries in his sides in front of Europe. So I think that's the main reason for this visits, not economics, more, I think it's political more than economics.
More than economic. Right. Now, how do you view the Egyptian-Chinese relations in terms of economic relations?
I think Egypt, because it's maybe it's the biggest population in the area, so it's very good markets for Chinese, and I think they are very interesting in it, and especially for the low quality products, they find good markets in the Middle East comparing to Europe and US, because they are always trying to find the high quality products. So I think they concentrate on the Middle East, and Egypt one of them, to as a market for the medium and low quality products, and maybe Egypt in the top of the list, because it's the biggest population in the Middle East.
Indeed. So on the same level as that, do you think that the Egyptian market needs to protect local products or domestic products when it comes to Chinese imports? Do the Chinese imports affect production in terms of Egyptian economy?
In some areas, sure, yes. Maybe
in what
some
areas?
In some areas, yes, but not all areas. But sure, there is a lot of Chinese products. It's very cheaper than the Egyptian products, and sure, this will affect our manufacturers in Egypt. And I think we need maybe put some customs or some taxes on these products to make good markets for the Egyptian product, and because it's more important for the Egyptian economy to have our products to
support their own products.
Support our products.
Right. And how about the Egyptian-Indian relations? Are we also benefiting from the technological exports of India?
I don't think this will affect our markets very much, because India product is not an Indian product. It's just can say it's just a local or just an technical support for the US companies. If we see biggest US companies just make some houses to develop their software in India to reduce their costs. So the end product is not an Indian product, but the end product will be an West product from US or Europe. So they will not sell us their products, but we will get their products from the main companies. So I don't see, at least for the current situations, maybe we'll not find a big cooperation between India and other countries, not only Egypt, but maybe a lot of countries will not find a good direct relation
between the two countries.
Yes.
Now, there was recently a dispute that erupted in the textile field, in the textiles in Egypt, when India stopped its exportation of yarn. India exports yarn, of course, and we all know that India is the #1 in this textile field. Can you further illustrate this dispute?
I think that's the picture. You can't see it's very clear. There's a lot of reports, so I think it's too early to find something about this area now. And maybe the pictures come clear maybe in the near futures. But I think it's not clear now to speak about it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So what do you think that both countries have that we don't have here in Egypt, which makes them competitive? What is it? Is it human resources? Is it technological capability? Is it international recognition? What makes these two countries emerging economic powers, in your opinion?
I think it's good utilization for the population. This is the main issue, good utilization. And they like to work, which I think this mentality is not found here in our culture. So they can utilize their populations very good. I think that the Egyptians citizens more educated than them, but as we see, that's the good utilization for them. And from beginning of the children, they put in their cultures how to work, how to do this work is very good, and this is the main issue. So I think we need to put that in our children also, even from primary schools.
Right. And finally, sir, let me ask you the future of China and India, in your opinion, in terms of economic emerging powers.
I think China will face a lot of problems. I think the India way may be easier.
Right. Mr. AbdelRahman Labib, economic expert, I'd like to thank you very much, sir, for joining us on tonight's edition of the Daily Debate. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this edition of the Daily Debate. Many thanks for joining us.